Nostalgia is a feeling that connects us with our past, as we all have some sort of memory of the so-called good old days. And through our media, we can reconnect with our past and re-experience these good memories. And it shows how much we crave nostalgia from what we still consume media-wise. Shows from 20, 30 years ago are still popular and more watched than a lot of recent shows. Even movies are just being made for the sake of us to return back to a world that we already once loved. And for the most part, it works. And it feels like we're at an all-time high for nostalgia. Could this be a nostalgia resurgence? I don't think so. Because people in the 90s were nostalgic for the 70s. And then people in the 70s were nostalgic for the 50s. And then people in the 50s were nostalgic for the 12th century.
Diggity dang it. I was born in the wrong generation. I wish I could have ruled the kingdom or something. Well, at least I'm not in the same generation as this loser.
Point is, all generations have felt some sort of nostalgia throughout history. Our generation, Gen Z, isn't that special. But what I think is special is our circumstances. Because now we're living in this digital age with everything feeling so overstimulating and oversaturated. And I think now, more than ever, people want to return to a simpler time, pre-digital age. People now crave that Y2K aesthetic. Y2K this, Y2K that, Y2K jeans, Y2K bling, Y2K shows and movies. Why are we too nostalgic? Are we okay?
Great question. But we're actually not okay, because nostalgia is in fact a disease, is what medical student Johannes Hofer said back in 1688. And this is Johannes Hofer back in 1688. And this is when nostalgia was first getting discovered. People were wondering, what is this thing? And back in 1688, this is when nostalgia was being defined as the pain caused by the desire to return to one's native land. And Johannes was noticing soldiers had these desires, and it was causing them so much psychological distress. They were freaking out, and it was pretty crazy. Nostalgia now is widely acceptable and is seen as more positive, like remembering that favorite spot that you used to visit or reminiscing on your childhood years. These memories are great, but they don't accurately portray all of our past. Nostalgia has a funny tendency to make us view the past in a way that is not consistent with reality. Within personal memory, it is tempting at times to remember the past with rose-colored glasses, while forgetting bad things. And this is something that we should be aware of, because we're all guilty of this, looking back at a snippet of the past and wanting to feel that again, but not looking at the bigger picture, which might not be as glamorous as you thought it was. And that's the thing with nostalgia, is that it tricks us unintentionally. However, brands, companies, those are the ones who trick us intentionally. Because nostalgia is a universal feeling, and sometimes companies use nostalgic techniques to help sell their product. Like sometimes it's reusing iconic characters or remembering people from the past to sell a certain product. But more recently, I'm seeing brands and companies demodernize themselves, creating a retro and vintage feeling for their consumers. Which is definitely interesting because it creates a more personal feel rather than feeling like a conglomerate business. And that makes sense because brands are advertising in a competitive market, and having some sort of emotional connection to your audience is extremely beneficial. A Frontiers in Psychology study says this: what consumers value when purchasing goods is not the functional utility of the product itself, but a kind of emotional satisfaction and spiritual recognition. And advertisers are pushing that box, trying whatever it takes to connect emotionally with the consumer, whether it be nostalgic visuals, music, or aesthetics. It's all in favor for the brand to try and connect with us. And this is also seen in the choices that movie studios make, trying to have this nostalgic connection to their viewer, more like trying to have a large amount of money connected to their bank account. And yes, I've seen great movies utilize nostalgic techniques greatly to their advantage, but I'm seeing too much of nostalgia in movies trying too hard to be something of the past while still just being a glossy, very modern film, and it just feels odd and out of place. Nostalgia feels more utilized than ever in our media, and it makes sense why we're so nostalgic, because the media incorporates nostalgic elements all around us. But like our brain, the media can kind of trick us with nostalgia on how the past is presented. When media brings back the picture of the good old days, companies are asking us to participate in selective memory. And sometimes the media can present a glamorized version of the past. And it begs the question, Are we really nostalgic for the past, or just the glamorized version that the media presents to us? Because if all we're seeing in the media is, oh, nostalgic fun times, then sure, yeah, subconsciously we're gonna think, yeah, everything was so much more fun and was so much better than it is now. And I think this is more of just a question with how we're consuming nostalgic media, because for the most part, people can still accept the reality of past decades while at the same time celebrating parts from our past as well too. And this would be coming from people who have lived through the 80s and 90s and now have nostalgia for it. However, Gen Z is an incredibly nostalgic generation too. But how are we so nostalgic with such less years lived than previous generations? And I'm coming at this from the perspective of a Gen Z as well, because I've also been feeling the effects of nostalgia as of recently too. But why are we resorting back to previous decades? And why specifically now? Well, I think similarly to other art forms, nostalgia can be used as a form of escapism. And the Gen Z generation is in or entering their adulthood. Things are serious now. And I think we've dealt with or are dealing with a lot of things in the world that previous generations haven't experienced at their age, either it being COVID, job hunting, or just a housing crisis, or even more negative stuff. And going back to your childhood roots is something so pure and wholesome. So of course, right now we want to go back into simpler activities that we did when we were younger and rewatch that show that we loved as a kid. These are theories and ideas that fill in why we're obsessed with nostalgia in a personal sense. But I also want to look at how our generation is obsessed with a time that we've never experienced. I bet you've seen those videos on YouTube that were filmed on the last day of high school from 20, 30 years ago, and looking at it, yeah, it does look pretty nice. Everyone seems cheerful. Back when people were excited when you shoved a camera in their face. Not a phone in sight. Just people living in the moment. And I think that's what we think we need, just living in the moment and being wholesome like those guys. But then again, we're still idolizing the glamorous snippets of the past and not the whole. Right now, Gen Z is searching for simplicity because of how refreshing it feels compared to the constant oversaturated media that we're seeing in this era, and it feels like escaping from all that. What I'm seeing online now is a big resurgence in 90s and early 2000s styles in media, and it's less of recreating the past, but instead using the past as a form of inspiration to create in the now. It's like the 90s and 2000s is a guidebook that we're using to style and create off of. Whether it be fashion trends, interior design, or just creating art and other forms of media. And I think we're demodernizing and looking for authenticity, things that those decades provided. And a lot of creatives online, including myself, are looking at styles and techniques from the past to create something new of their own. Music is another art form that uses nostalgic styles and techniques greatly. There's so many artists out there now that have created something of their own while paying homage to the music of the past. My favorite album from last year, Two Star and the Dream Please, is an album that creates a soundscape of its own, yet feels very liminal and strangely familiar to us.
I wanted it to feel like something so recognizable, but at the same time, there is no possible way that there's anything out like this today. That was the goal. And it was like, there's a strangeness to that and there's a creepiness to that as well that I'm really obsessed with.
When we think of movies that incorporate nostalgia, we might look towards movies that capture the past in a flashy or exciting manner, but nostalgia isn't limited just to old hairdos or old music or old cars, but how we deal with the past and how we choose to move forward. There's some great films that deal with the ideas of nostalgia, like Lost in Translation or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But more recently, After Sun, a movie that has grown on me over the last couple years, uses nostalgia to portray the childhood memories of Sophie and how she reflects on these memories years later. And the film feels like a memory. It creates something so personal and intimate while having themes and feelings that are universal. Nostalgia can be a powerful feeling. We feel its effects creep up on us now and then. I feel it every time I listen to Jack Johnson's Upside Down from the Curious George movie soundtrack. And maybe we rely on nostalgia a bit too heavily to escape to the past. But can using nostalgia as a form of escapism be a bad thing though? Because I think art can be seen as a positive force in escapism, and I think nostalgia as well can be seen as a positive force too, only if the intentions aren't forced. Because a lot of the times now I'm finding myself using nostalgia just to escape where I'm at in the present. And I know I shouldn't be hyper fixating on how good I thought I had it back then, because cherishing the memories, that's normal, that's completely fine. But I think chasing those memories, chasing those feelings, that's gonna get exhausting when you realize that now isn't going to be what it used to be. And sometimes that can be off-putting, but maybe it's freeing to know that you don't need to be limited to your past, because nostalgia is a deep feeling that connects ourselves to our past, and it's something that gives us self-continuity. And I think looking back, it helps us realize where we've been and how far we've come. How watching a movie that we grew up on can flood our brain with so many positive emotions. But if some guy down the street watches that same movie, he's not going to feel those same emotions because he wasn't the one who grew up with it. When we taste a specific food, and when we remember the person who would always make this for us, or when we listen to a song and we remember where we were in life when we first listened to it, the point is that nostalgia is a great aspect of life to experience. And it makes sense why we appreciate it so much, because the feeling of nostalgia is something so universal that everyone has felt it before. But the memories themselves, those are personally connected to you and your journey. And I think that's really cool. Thank you guys for watching this video. This is me after recording it, and I haven't edited it yet, so who knows, maybe it turned out to be really bad. But hopefully it turned out to be pretty good, and I enjoyed making it. So far, I guess I haven't edited it yet, and I hope you guys like it. Okay,